Thank you very much for joining me here today. To start off, Taiwan's government issued an island-wide alert on Tuesday saying a Chinese satellite had flown over its southern airspace, which Taiwan's foreign minister described as part of a pattern of harassment just days before a pivotal election. Here's more.
Thank you. The gentleman in the middle.
Taiwan issued an island-wide air raid alert on Tuesday.
The PRC has fired a satellite.
Interrupting this news conference held by Taiwanese Foreign Minister Joseph Wu. The security alert sent by the Taiwanese Defense Ministry stated that a Chinese satellite had flown over its southern airspace. It described the projectile as a satellite in Chinese and a missile in English. Taiwan's main opposition Kuomintang Party criticized the alert, saying the English translation had misled the public. Chinese state media claimed it was an astronomical satellite. Taiwan's defense ministry later blamed negligence for the incorrect use of the term missile and said it would conduct a review into the incorrect use of the term. Foreign Minister Wu said the launch of the satellite came at the sensitive moment of the upcoming presidential and parliamentary election on Saturday. He referred to the launch as, quote, China's attempt to interfere in our free and democratic election.
I would classify that as part of their gray zone activities, like flying balloon over Taiwan, or sending one of its tow ship, it's a large ship, towing some objects, coming very close to Taiwan, and today is very close to our offshore islands in Jinmen and Mazu. So all these kinds of tactics is classified as gray zone activities. Continue to remind the people here in Taiwan that there's a danger of war in between Taiwan and China.
For years, Taiwan has complained about China's stepped-up military actions. Beijing claims Taiwan as its own territory and has cast the elections as a choice between peace and war across the Taiwan Strait. Taiwan's government rejects China's sovereignty assertions.
And the Chinese Communist Party has been accused of meddling in the upcoming Taiwan election through unconventional means. And what does that have to do with the popular boy band? NTD's Sean Marshall has more.
China pressured a popular Taiwanese rock band Mayday to make pro-China comments ahead of Taiwan's key elections next month in attempts to sway public opinion and the youth vote in Taiwan. The campaign against Mayday is part of China's hybrid warfare strategy, which includes non-military efforts to influence Taiwan through social media and economic coercion. After the band declined to make pro-Beijing comments, Chinese authorities threatened the band with a fine for lip-syncing, a practice which is banned in China. China's National Radio and Television Administration asked the band Mayday to publicly voice support for Beijing's claims that democratically governed Taiwan is part of China, according to an internal Taiwan security note reviewed by Reuters. Mayday's management company, BN Music, has previously denied allegations of lip-syncing during the band's November tour in China. One day before the presidential vote in 2016, a Taiwanese singer with a South Korean girl band publicly apologized for holding a Taiwan flag, prompting anger in Taiwan as it voted for its next president. The lip-sync investigation's findings and any penalties for Mayday have not been made public. Sean Marshall, NTD News.
Now on to markets. The S&P 500 and Dow lost ground and closed lower on Tuesday as investors assessed the timing and size of any Federal Reserve interest rate cuts in 2024 ahead of inflation data this week. Here's a quick recap of markets.
U.S. stocks closed mostly lower Tuesday as investors awaited key inflation reports likely to provide more insight about when the Federal Reserve will begin to cut rates. The Dow dropped 0.4%. The S&P 500 slipped more than 0.1%, and the Nasdaq added 0.1%. Expectations the Fed could begin cutting rates as soon as March have been slowly decreasing, according to CME's FedWatch tool.
We do expect some volatility here at the beginning of the year as we look to see what is actually going to happen with the Federal Reserve.
Lorene Gilbert is CEO of WealthWise Financial Services.
That's another reason why the markets are in pause, is that the markets were pricing in an 80% probability of a Fed rate cut in March. And then we've recently had a job report that was very strong. So with that, the Federal Reserve is not going to be in any rush to lower rates in March or immediately. So while we don't think that they're going to raise rates, it's the timing of when they're going to start lowering rates where the market may have gotten ahead of itself.
Inflation data later in the week will provide more insight about the timing of the Fed's rate cuts. In company news, shares of Boeing dropped for a second straight session to close down 1.4%. The plane maker, U.S. regulators, and airlines were still wrangling over 737 MAX 9 inspection guidelines after airlines found loose parts from grounded MAX planes. This comes days after an Alaska Airlines plane lost a panel mid-flight. Juniper Networks surged nearly 22% after a source told Reuters that Hewlett-Packard Enterprise was in talks to buy the networking product maker in a $13 billion deal. Hewlett-Packard Enterprise dropped nearly 9%. And earnings season unofficially begins on Friday with reports from banks such as J.P. Morgan Chase.
Meta will be restricting content for teens as the tech giant faces mounting pressure to protect young users. In a blog post, Meta Platforms said all teens will be placed in the most restrictive content control settings on Facebook and Instagram. And searches on Instagram will also have added restrictions. Meta says this will make it more difficult for young users to come across sensitive content like self-harm and eating disorders. And the new measures are expected to be rolled out in the coming weeks. Boeing CEO Dave Calhoun on Tuesday addressed last week's mid-air panel blowout from an Alaska Airlines jet, acknowledging that the plane maker made a mistake and telling staff it would work with regulators to make sure it can never happen again. Here are the details.
Boeing has admitted to errors over the blowout on an Alaska Airlines jet last week. The 737 MAX 9 lost a large panel from its fuselage, forcing pilots into an emergency landing. No one was seriously hurt, but the incident raised big questions about how Boeing's top-selling jet is made. On Tuesday, Chief Executive Dave Calhoun said the plane maker acknowledged failures over quality control. He said Boeing would approach the problem with 100% transparency and ensure there was no recurrence. US watchdogs have grounded 171 of the planes for checks, with airlines around the world also taking the jets out of service. Concerns had deepened after United Airlines said it had found loose bolts on some of its aircraft. On Tuesday, White House spokesperson Karine Jean-Pierre said travelers had a right to feel safe.
And in that spirit, these particular Boeing aircraft will remain grounded until operators complete enhanced inspections.
The MAX was already under scrutiny following 2 earlier fatal crashes. Those incidents were traced to a design fault that was subsequently fixed. But the jet has since been plagued by numerous production and quality control issues, threatening deeper damage to Boeing's reputation. Calhoun said the new drama had left customers very anxious. Figures out this week showed Boeing hit its jetliner production targets for 2023. But lagged arch-rival Airbus for the 5th year running.
And Google is defending its AI technology in a Boston courtroom in a multi-billion-dollar U.S. patent infringement case. Parent company Alphabet is accused of infringing on 2 patents to power its AI features on Google Search, Gmail, and other Google services. The patents are owned by Singular Computing, and this company is founded by computer scientist Joseph Bates. And Bates claims he shared his innovations with Google years ago, and Google copied his technology. Google said it developed its processors independently over many years, and that its processors work differently than Singular's. And the lawsuit is asking for $7 billion in damages. Now, managing finances can be especially challenging for retirees or people who plan to retire soon. So let's take a look at the changes to Social Security payments and Medicare this year, and some expert advice about how you can adjust your outlook.
U.S. inflation continued to decline in 2023, and the financial picture for Americans, including retirees, is improving. For that reason, monthly Social Security payments will only rise by 3.2% this year, based on the cost of living adjustment. AARP Senior Vice President Bill Sweeney says the boost is a bit disappointing in contrast to 2022's 8.7% increase, a 40-year high.
This is probably not enough for them to be able to feel comfortable and confident about their savings.
Another concern, standard premiums for Medicare Part B are back on the rise. The portion of Medicare that covers doctor visits and other outpatient treatment is up 6%. On the bright side, people who haven't retired yet can now sock more money away. People 50 and over can contribute up to $30,500 to a 401k or another type of deferred compensation plan this year.
That's a little bit extra money that you can put away in your retirement, which is a great way to save and get caught up before you retire.
Finally, 4 decades after Congress voted to slowly raise the full retirement age from 65 to 67, the goal close to being achieved, reaching 66 in 8 months in the final half of 2024. While you can begin collecting Social Security before age 67, your payments will be permanently reduced. On the other hand, waiting until 70 earns you a bonus.
We really urge people to think about what is the right age to start claiming Social Security to maximize how much money you can get.
A new survey shows that small business sentiment is up in the United States, but despite that, labor and inflation are still weighing sentiment down. The National Federation of Independent Business Index rose to nearly 92 in December. This is the first increase since July last year, but this is still below the 5-decade average. More owners are now reporting inflation as their top concern. This comes after U.S. consumer prices unexpectedly went up in November. Labor costs also continue to weigh down earnings, but a portion of owners said they expect better conditions in the next 6 months. Meanwhile, lawmakers on Capitol Hill face critical government funding deadlines as they return to Washington this week. While party leadership did reach a deal on top-line spending numbers over the weekend, more work remains to avert a government shutdown. Here's more.
I have excellent news on government funding. Yesterday, I announced with Speaker Johnson that congressional leaders have reached a top-line agreement for government funding for the 2024 fiscal year.
Over the weekend, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and House Speaker Mike Johnson agreed to $1.59 trillion in overall government spending for fiscal year 2024. With $886 billion going to defense spending and $704 billion to non-defense spending.
We've been negotiating in good faith all through the holidays, every day over the holidays, except for Christmas.
Coming to this agreement is an important first step, but experts point out there are still challenges ahead for Johnson, who is still new to this role.
He faces the same challenges that Kevin McCarthy faced and any other Republican speaker was going to face. An incredibly historically small majority where few members are able to jump ship and then be able to pass legislation.
The far-right House Freedom Caucus, a group that played a key role in ousting Johnson's predecessor, Kevin McCarthy, says the top-line deal is a, quote, total failure, and is calling for more dramatic spending cuts. The stakes of the House negotiations are high for individual members, as each one looks to tout legislative wins ahead of the 2024 elections.
Every single seat is up for re-election, and they're always looking through the lens of what is good for me electorally, what is good for our party electorally.
The holiday shopping season is over, but the bills are still sticking around. According to new data from the Federal Reserve, Americans have racked up major debt. The Fed's latest consumer credit report reveals that U.S. consumer borrowing spiked in November by nearly $24 billion. The increase was driven by higher rates on revolving credit, like credit cards, which soared to nearly $19.5 billion. This is the third highest monthly increase on record. Analysts are sounding the alarm on increased credit balances, noting that delinquencies are now the highest in a decade. The U.S. Department of Labor on Tuesday issued a final rule that will force companies to treat some workers as employees rather than less expensive independent contractors. This is a move that has riled the business groups and will likely prompt legal challenges. Here's the report.
The Biden administration on Tuesday issued a new rule that makes it harder for companies to treat gig workers as independent contractors, forcing businesses to offer salary benefits and protections that full-time employees receive. The move has riled some companies who rely heavily on gig workers, such as Uber, Lyft, and DoorDash, whose costs could increase by as much as 30%, and therefore legal challenges are expected. The new rule from the Labor Department overturns one put in place under former President Donald Trump's administration, which made it easier to classify workers as independent contractors. Workers will now be considered employees rather than contractors when they are economically dependent on a company. Business groups and Republican lawmakers say that will cause millions of workers to lose job opportunities and create confusion that could lead to costly litigation. But worker advocates and some Democratic leaders say the rule is necessary to ensure basic worker protections. The new rule is set to take effect March 11th.
The global economy is predicted to slow this year for a third year in a row due to high interest rates and inflation. The World Bank is forecasting that the global economy will expand just 2.4% this year. And this is a drop from years prior and the third consecutive decline. The gloomy forecast is based in part on high interest rates, inflation as well, sluggish trading, and deeply indebted poor countries. Last year, the U.S. led the way with 2.5% growth, but the World Bank expects U.S. growth to drop this year. A similar prediction is being made for China's economy as well, which was the leading engine in global growth for decades but has sputtered. Slumping growth in China will likely have a ripple effect on developing countries that supply the Chinese market. The Consumer Electronics Show is underway. The annual event sets the stage for some of the biggest tech trends of the year. And of course, in 2024, it's all about artificial intelligence. Here's what we can expect to see.
From toothbrushes to tell you when you missed a spot, to grills that measure the thickness of your meat, to hit the perfect temperature faster. The name of the game at this year's Consumer Electronics Show is AI.
If you think about all the products you own that call themselves smart, smartphones, smartwatches, smart TVs, and then really think about it, they're not really smart yet. They're connected, they're adapted, they're personalizable. But to really be smart and anticipate your needs, that's where they're going to need AI.
With AI at the top of everyone's mind, the question is, how soon before smart devices become smarter than us?
It'll take a few years for all these tech products to get AI and get smart. Doesn't happen overnight or at one CES. But when it does happen, you're going to find that these products are so much easier to use and deliver so much more.
The Las Vegas event is the largest consumer tech conference of the year. The show will feature more than 4,000 exhibitors and 1,200 startups from all over the world.
It has been a pretty reliable weather vane of what's going to be important in consumer technology in the year ahead.
Beyond AI, CNET editor-at-large Brian Cooley says the big trend this year is personalization.
So that services start to make themselves work, as opposed to us always having to push and click and search and like and create our own preferences. It's time for technology to sense our preferences.
I'm Ivan Rodriguez reporting.
Tesla has lowered driving range estimates across its lineup of electric vehicles as new U.S. government vehicle testing regulation takes effect, with the goal of ensuring that automakers accurately reflect real-world performance. Take a look.
Tesla cars can't go as far as the company once claimed. The EV pioneer has cut driving range estimates across its product lineup. That as new regulations come into effect with a view to ensuring automakers don't make exaggerated claims. Back in July, Reuters reported that Tesla had rigged an algorithm that controls range estimates shown on the dashboard. The story also revealed that the firm created a secret team to suppress thousands of customer complaints over range. Now a review of figures on Tesla websites reveals that estimates have been changed. For the Model S Plaid sedan, the number drops from 396 miles to 359. For one variant of the Model Y crossover, the figure goes from 303 miles down to 285. Tesla did not respond to a request for comment on the changes. It has long touted the long range of its vehicles as a key benefit. However, experts have said the numbers were inflated. Automotive website Edmunds said most EVs it tested actually exceeded their claimed range, with Tesla being the notable exception. Ford and General Motors said they had not had to change any figures as a result of the new regulations.
Taiwan chipmaker TSMC reported a largely flat fourth quarter revenue on Wednesday, but that still beat both the company's and market expectations. Take a look.
TSMC reported a largely flat fourth quarter revenue on Wednesday, but it still beat both the company's and market's expectations. The world's largest contract chipmaker includes tech giants Apple and Nvidia as customers. It's benefited from a boom in artificial intelligence applications. Revenue in the final 3 months of last year came in at $20.1 billion, slightly up from a year ago. Both TSMC and analysts had predicted lower than that, but December proved a challenging month. TSMC reported revenue fell 8.4% year-on-year, sharply worse than in the previous month. The firm did not provide any details or forward guidance in its brief revenue statement. It's also due to report fourth quarter earnings on January 18th, when the firm will also update its outlook for the current quarter and the year.
And that's all we have today for you on NTD Business. Thank you for watching and see you soon.